In the heart of downtown, where towering glass buildings scraped the sky and the streets buzzed with the rhythm of busy professionals, there was a company called Crestwood Enterprises. It wasn't just another corporate office. It was a place where ambition thrived, where dreams were either realized or crushed under the weight of competition. Among the sea of suits and ties, Maya Thompson stood out, not because she was different, but because she carried herself with a quiet confidence that commanded respect. She was smart, driven, and had earned her spot as one of the top marketing executives in the firm. Maya's journey to this position hadn't been easy. As a black woman in an industry dominated by people who didn't look like her, she'd faced challenges from day one. There were whispers behind closed doors, skeptical glances when she pitched ideas, and moments when her contributions were overlooked until someone else repeated them. But none of that stopped her. Maya believed in her abilities, and she worked harder than anyone else to prove herself. Over time, she climbed the ladder, earning promotions and accolades along the way. Still, despite her success, she couldn't ignore the subtle and sometimes not so subtle signs of bias around her. It all came to a head on a particularly tense Tuesday afternoon. The air in the conference room was thick with stress as the marketing team gathered for their weekly strategy meeting. Deadlines loomed, clients were demanding, and tempers were running high. Maya sat at the table, her laptop open, ready to present her latest campaign idea. She had spent countless hours perfecting every detail, ensuring it would resonate with their target audience and drive results. But before she could even begin, things took a turn. One of her colleagues, Ryan, a man whose arrogance often overshadowed his competence, interrupted her mid-sentence. He leaned back in his chair, smirking as he dismissed her proposal with a wave of his hand. "This is too complicated," he said, rolling his eyes. "We don't need all these bells and whistles." His tone dripped with condescension, and several others in the room exchanged uncomfortable glances. Maya, however, remained calm. She knew better than to let him rattle her. With a polite but firm smile, she explained why her approach was necessary, citing data and examples to back up her argument. But Ryan wasn't interested in logic. He seemed determined to undermine her at every step. When another colleague tried to support Maya's idea, Ryan shot them down too, making snide comments about how some people always needed validation. The tension in the room grew palpable, and Maya could feel her frustration mounting. Still, she refused to engage in petty arguments. Instead, she focused on staying professional, hoping the meeting would end soon so she could regroup. Then it happened. As Maya reached for her water bottle, Ryan suddenly grabbed a can of soda from the center of the table. Without warning, he flicked it open and splashed its contents directly onto her. The sticky liquid soaked through her blouse, staining the fabric and dripping onto her notes. For a moment, the entire room froze. No one spoke. No one moved. Everyone stared in stunned silence as Maya sat there, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. The coldness of the soda seeped into her skin, but it was nothing compared to the chill of humiliation that washed over her. Ryan laughed nervously, trying to brush off the act as a joke. "Oops," he muttered, though his smirk suggested otherwise. A few people chuckled awkwardly, clearly unsure how to react. Others looked away, avoiding eye contact altogether. Even their manager, who should have stepped in to address the situation, remained silent, pretending to shuffle papers in an attempt to avoid confrontation. Maya felt the weight of everyone's inaction pressing down on her. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she refused to give Ryan the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Taking a deep breath, she pushed her chair back and stood up, gathering her belongings. "Excuse me," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Without waiting for a response, she walked out of the room, leaving behind a trail of shocked faces and unanswered questions. Once she was safely in the restroom, Maya allowed herself a moment to process what had just happened. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, watching as droplets of soda slid down her arms. How could something so small, a splash of liquid, feel so monumental? It wasn't just about the ruined blouse or the ruined presentation. It was about the years of microaggressions, The dismissive attitudes and the feeling of being constantly underestimated simply because of who she was. And worst of all, it was about the fact that no one in that room had stood up for her. Not even the people who claimed to be her allies. As she dabbed at her clothes with paper towels, Maya made a decision. Enough was enough. She wouldn't let this incident define her, nor would she let it go unnoticed. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever been treated unfairly because of their race, gender, or background. She deserved justice, and she was going to fight for it, not just for herself, but for everyone who felt powerless in the face of discrimination. Little did she know this moment would set off a chain reaction that would change not only her life, but the lives of countless others. By the time Maya returned home that evening, she was physically and emotionally drained. The events of the day replayed in her mind like a broken record, each memory amplifying her frustration and anger. She wanted nothing more than to forget about work, to let the comfort of her home wash away the stress. But as she stepped inside, she found Marcus sitting in their cozy living room, his laptop open on the coffee table, but his attention fully on her. His sharp eyes immediately noticed something was off. "Hey," he said softly, setting aside his work. "You look different. Is everything okay?" Maya hesitated. She debated brushing it off with a vague excuse, something about a long day or an annoying meeting, but she couldn't bring herself to lie to him. Marcus wasn't just her husband, he was her rock, her confidant, and her biggest supporter. He had been there through every challenge they'd faced together, from the early days when she was struggling to prove herself in her career, to the later years when his own success skyrocketed. There was no point hiding this from him. Taking a deep breath, Maya sat down across from him and began recounting the incident. At first, she tried to downplay it, describing Ryan's behavior as childish and immature. But as she talked, the words spilled out faster, rawer. She told him about the soda being splashed on her, the humiliation of sitting there while no one said a word, and the sinking realization that even her manager hadn't stepped in to defend her. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her face, not because she was weak, but because the weight of it all was finally catching up to her. Marcus listened intently, his expression unreadable at first. But as Maya spoke, his jaw tightened, and his hands clenched into fists. Anyone who knew Marcus understood that his calm exterior was deceptive. Beneath it lay a fierce determination to protect the people he loved. And right now, seeing Maya hurt stirred something primal within him, a protective instinct that refused to be ignored. When Maya finished, Marcus didn't say anything for a moment. He simply reached over and took her hand in his, squeezing it gently. Then, in a voice so steady it sent shivers down her spine, he said, "This isn't just about today. This is about everything you've put up with for years, and I'm not going to let them get away with it." Maya blinked, surprised by the intensity in his tone. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "I mean," Marcus replied, leaning forward, "that we're going to make sure this never happens again to you or anyone else. Crestwood thinks they can treat you like this. Fine. Let's see how they handle me." At first, Maya wasn't sure what to think. Marcus was a billionaire, entrepreneur, yes, but he rarely used his wealth or influence to meddle in personal matters. Sure, he supported causes he believed in, funding scholarships and donating to charities, but this felt different. This was personal. "Marcus," she said carefully, "you don't have to do anything drastic. It's just one bad day." "One bad day?" Marcus repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Maya, this isn't just anything. This is systemic. They've let this kind of behavior slide for too long, and someone needs to hold them accountable. If they won't do it themselves, then I will." Before Maya could protest further, Marcus picked up his phone and started making calls. First, he contacted his legal team, asking them to gather any information they could find about Crestwood Enterprises, their financials, their investors, their leadership structure. Next, he called a close friend who worked in human resources at another major corporation, seeking advice on how best to approach the situation without causing unnecessary drama. Finally, he reached out to a journalist he trusted, tipping them off about potential misconduct at Crestwood. Every move was calculated, strategic, and designed to send a clear message. Things were about to change. As Marcus worked, Maya watched him with a mix of awe and apprehension. She admired his passion and his willingness to fight for her, but she couldn't help worrying about the fallout. What if this backfired? What if it made her look like the problem instead of the victim? Sensing her unease, Marcus paused and turned to her. "Listen," he said gently. "I know this might seem extreme, but trust me. You deserve better than this, and if Crestwood can't give it to you, then they don't deserve your talent. Or anyone else's." Maya nodded slowly, feeling a spark of hope ignite within her. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe this wasn't just about her anymore. Maybe it was about standing up against injustice, about showing others that they didn't have to tolerate mistreatment in silence. With renewed resolve, she joined Marcus in planning their next steps. Together, they drafted a list of demands, immediate consequences for those involved in the incident, including Ryan and the complicit supervisors, mandatory diversity training for all employees, and transparent policies to prevent future discrimination. They also decided that Marcus would personally visit Crestwood the following day, ready to present these demands directly to the company's leadership. If they refused to comply, Marcus had leverage. He held significant investments in several projects tied to Crestwood, and he wasn't afraid to pull them if necessary. As the night wore on, Maya felt a strange sense of empowerment growing within her. For so long, she'd carried the burden of these experiences alone, internalizing the pain and doubt. But now, with Marcus by her side, she realized she didn't have to carry it anymore. Together, they were stronger. Together, they could create real change. The next morning, as the sun rose over the city skyline, Maya woke up with a newfound sense of purpose. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she wasn't walking it alone. As she prepared for the day, she glanced at Marcus, who was already dressed in one of his signature tailored suits, exuding confidence and authority. "Ready?" he asked, flashing her a reassuring smile. "Ready," Maya replied, her voice firm, and with that they headed out the door, ready to confront Crestwood Enterprises head-on. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. The world was about to learn that messing with Maya Thompson and her billionaire husband was a mistake. They wouldn't soon forget. The next morning, the atmosphere at Crestwood Enterprises was unusually tense. Employees shuffled into the office, exchanging nervous glances and hushed whispers. Word had spread quickly about Maya's incident with Ryan, though details were murky and exaggerated. Some claimed it was a harmless prank gone wrong, while others insisted it was a deliberate act of hostility. Regardless of the truth, one thing was clear. Something big was brewing, and no one could ignore the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. At precisely 9:30 a.m., a sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb outside the building. Heads turned as Marcus Thompson stepped out, his presence commanding attention even before he entered the lobby. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, with polished shoes that gleamed under the fluorescent lights, Marcus exuded power and authority. He moved with purpose, his strides confident and unhurried, as if he owned the place, which, in a way, he did. His tech empire had indirectly contributed millions to Crestwood through various partnerships and investments, making him not just an influential figure, but a critical stakeholder in the company's success. Security guards stationed at the entrance straightened their postures as Marcus approached. One of them stepped forward hesitantly, unsure whether to ask for identification or simply let him pass. Before they could decide, Marcus spoke in a tone that left no room for argument. "I'm here to see the CEO," he said firmly, flashing a brief smile that didn't reach his eyes. The guard nodded hastily and buzzed him through, clearly intimidated by the billionaire's aura. Inside, employees craned their necks to catch a glimpse of Marcus as he made his way toward the executive wing. Phones buzzed with text messages and emails alerting everyone to his arrival. By the time he reached the CEO's office, Senior Vice President Linda Harper was already waiting, flustered and unprepared for the whirlwind about to descend upon them. She greeted Marcus with a forced smile, her voice trembling slightly as she ushered him into a private conference room. Minutes later, the CEO, Richard Caldwell, arrived, his face pale and sweaty. Known for his ability to charm investors and smooth-talk clients, Richard suddenly looked like a man facing Judgment Day. He extended a shaky hand to Marcus, who shook it briefly before taking a seat at the head of the table. Maya followed close behind, standing quietly beside Marcus as he began speaking. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice," Marcus said, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Unfortunately, this visit isn't social. I'm here because of an incident involving my wife, Maya." He gestured toward her, his expression softening for a moment before hardening again. "What happened yesterday is unacceptable, not only as a personal affront to her dignity but also as a reflection of your company's culture." Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair, glancing at Linda for support. Neither of them dared interrupt as Marcus continued. "Let me be clear. Maya has endured months of discriminatory behavior at this company. Yesterday's event was the tipping point, but it wasn't isolated. It's symptomatic of a much larger problem, a toxic environment where accountability is non-existent and prejudice thrives unchecked." Marcus paused, letting his words sink in. Then, without missing a beat, he slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents detailing instances of bias Maya had documented over the years, emails, meeting notes, and witness accounts, all meticulously organized. "These aren't allegations," Marcus stated bluntly. "They're facts, and, if you choose to ignore them, I assure you the consequences will be severe." The room fell silent. Richard opened the folder, his hands trembling as he flipped through the pages. Beside him, Linda stared at the table, avoiding eye contact. Both knew they were cornered. Crestwood couldn't afford to lose Marcus's financial backing, especially during a period when the company was already struggling to meet its quarterly targets. But more than that, they couldn't risk the public relations nightmare that would follow if news of this leaked to the media. Desperate to salvage the situation, Richard cleared his throat and attempted to speak. "Mr. Thompson, please understand that we take these matters very seriously. If there have been oversights, we are committed to addressing them immediately." Marcus raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Addressing them how? With empty promises and vague assurances? That won't cut it this time. Here's what's going to happen. Every individual involved in fostering this hostile environment, including Ryan, his enablers, and anyone in leadership who failed to intervene, will be terminated effective today. Additionally, you will implement mandatory diversity training for all employees, hire an external consultant to audit your workplace policies, and establish transparent reporting mechanisms for incidents of discrimination." Richard opened his mouth to protest, but Marcus cut him off. "And if any of this isn't done to my satisfaction, I'll pull every ounce of investment I have tied to this company. Do I make myself clear?" There was no room for negotiation. Richard and Linda exchanged panicked looks before nodding in agreement. They knew they had no choice but to comply. Within hours, HR teams were summoned, termination letters drafted, and meetings scheduled to announce sweeping changes throughout the organization. As the day wore on, chaos erupted across Crestwood. Employees gathered in clusters, whispering anxiously about who would be fired next. Ryan, predictably, was among the first to go. When security escorted him out of the building, his face red with anger and disbelief, many felt a mix of shock and relief. Others followed suit. Supervisors who had turned a blind eye, colleagues who had enabled bad behavior, and even a few higher-ups whose negligence had allowed such toxicity to fester. Meanwhile, Marcus remained in the conference room, ensuring that every demand was met. Maya sat beside him, watching as her husband transformed into a force of nature. She'd always known he was capable of great things, but seeing him channel his influence to fight for justice filled her with pride. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly supported, not just by words but by action. By late afternoon, the initial wave of firings was complete, and Crestwood's leadership team scrambled to draft a public statement addressing the changes. Marcus reviewed it carefully, making edits to ensure it conveyed genuine remorse rather than hollow platitudes. Once satisfied, he leaned back in his chair and turned to Maya. "This is just the beginning," he said softly. "We've sent a message, but the real work starts now." Maya nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude and determination. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Rebuilding trust and creating lasting change would require effort from everyone involved. But for the first time in years, she felt hopeful. Hopeful that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Not just for her, but for everyone who deserved to work in a safe and respectful environment. As they left the building together, hand in hand, employees watched from windows and cubicles, murmuring about what had just transpired. Some admired Maya's courage and Marcus's unwavering support, while others worried about the ripple effects of such drastic measures. Whatever their thoughts, one thing was undeniable. Crestwood Enterprises would never be the same again, and neither would the people within it. The aftermath of Marcus's visit to Crestwood Enterprises was nothing short of seismic. By the end of the day, news of the mass firings had spread like wildfire through the office and beyond. Social media platforms buzzed with speculation as employees discreetly posted updates under anonymous handles. Journalists began sniffing around for details, eager to uncover the full story behind the sudden shakeup at one of the city's most prominent companies. For many workers at Crestwood, it felt like the ground beneath their feet had shifted permanently. Ryan and his cohorts were gone, their desks cleared out and replaced by temporary nameplates for new hires yet to come. The sight of empty workstations served as a stark reminder of what had happened, but it also sent a powerful message. No one, not even longtime employees or senior staff, was untouchable when it came to accountability. While some colleagues whispered that Ryan had deserved what he got, others couldn't help feeling uneasy. The speed and severity of the consequences left everyone on edge, wondering if they too might be scrutinized for past actions. Amidst the chaos, Maya found herself at the center of attention in ways she hadn't anticipated. Colleagues who had previously ignored her now approached her with cautious smiles and awkward apologies. "I'm so sorry about what happened," one woman said during a coffee break. "If I'd known how bad things were, I would have said something." Another colleague admitted, "You handled everything so gracefully. I don't know if I could have done the same." At first, Maya wasn't sure how to respond. Part of her wanted to dismiss their words as insincere. After all, where had this support been when she needed it most? But another part of her recognized that change often started with discomfort. These conversations, however awkward, were a step toward greater awareness. So instead of shutting people down, Maya chose to engage. She shared her experiences candidly, explaining how small acts of bias could accumulate over time, eroding confidence and creating barriers. Her openness encouraged others to reflect on their own behaviors, sparking meaningful discussions about inclusivity and respect. Meanwhile, Marcus wasted no time capitalizing on the momentum. True to his word, he didn't stop at firing those responsible for perpetuating toxicity at Crestwood. He worked closely with the company's leadership to implement sweeping reforms aimed at fostering a healthier workplace culture. Diversity. Training sessions became mandatory for all employees, led by expert facilitators who challenged participants to confront their biases and assumptions. Anonymous reporting systems were introduced, allowing individuals to flag discriminatory behavior without fear of retaliation. And external auditors were brought in to review policies and procedures, ensuring transparency and fairness at every level. But Marcus didn't stop there. Recognizing that systemic issues required systemic solutions, he announced the creation of the Thompson Equity Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting underrepresented professionals in corporate environments. Through scholarships, mentorship programs, and advocacy initiatives, the foundation sought to dismantle barriers and create opportunities for marginalized communities. Maya played an integral role in shaping its mission, drawing from her own experiences to guide its direction. As weeks turned into months, the impact of these changes began to take root. Employees reported feeling safer and more valued, knowing that their voices mattered. New hires brought fresh perspectives, enriching the company's culture with diverse ideas and backgrounds. Slowly but surely, Crestwood began to transform, not just as a business but as a community committed to equity and inclusion. For Maya, the journey was far from easy. There were moments when doubt crept in, whispering that perhaps she had pushed too hard, asked for too much. But each time she wavered, Marcus reminded her why they had fought so fiercely. "This isn't just for you," he told her one evening, as they sat together on their balcony overlooking the city lights. "It's for everyone who's ever felt invisible or powerless. You're not just changing Crestwood, you're setting an example for the world." His words resonated deeply with Maya, reinforcing her belief that the fight for justice was worth every struggle. Yet, as fulfilling as these victories were, they also marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. After years of pouring her energy into proving herself at Crestwood, Maya realized she no longer belonged there. The company had changed, yes, but so had she. She no longer wanted to climb ladders built on exclusion. She wanted to build bridges instead. With Marcus's encouragement, Maya made the bold decision to leave Crestwood behind and dedicate herself fully to the Thompson Equity Foundation. Together, they expanded its reach, partnering with schools, businesses, and advocacy groups to promote diversity and inclusion on a broader scale. They hosted conferences, published research papers, and launched campaigns highlighting the importance of representation in leadership roles. Their efforts earned widespread recognition, inspiring other organizations to follow suit. Through it all, Maya discovered a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a victim-turned-survivor. She was a leader, a changemaker, and a beacon of hope for countless others navigating similar challenges. People reached out to her daily, via email, social media, and even in person, sharing stories of how her courage had inspired them to speak up and demand better. Each message fueled her determination to keep pushing forward, reminding her that the work was far from over. Looking back, Maya sometimes marveled at how one incident, a single moment of humiliation, had set off such a profound chain reaction. What had initially felt like a personal defeat had ultimately become a catalyst for transformation, not only within Crestwood, but across industries. It was proof that even in the face of adversity, resilience could spark change, and that standing up for oneself wasn't just an act of defiance, but an act of love for humanity. And though the scars of the past would always linger, Maya carried them proudly, knowing they were testaments to her strength. With Marcus by her side and a growing army of supporters behind her, she stepped boldly into the future, ready to continue the fight for equality, dignity, and justice, one step at a time. Months had passed since the dramatic events at Crestwood Enterprises, and the world was still talking about them. The story of Maya Thompson and her billionaire husband Marcus had become a symbol of resilience, accountability, and the power of standing up against injustice. From news outlets to social media platforms, their names were everywhere, mentioned in articles, discussed on podcasts, and celebrated at conferences focused on workplace equity. What started as a single incident of discrimination had snowballed into a movement that inspired countless individuals and organizations to rethink how they approached diversity and inclusion. For Maya, leaving Crestwood Enterprises marked the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with purpose, passion, and possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine before. Working alongside Marcus at the Thompson Equity Foundation gave her a sense of fulfillment that no corporate title ever could. Every day, she woke up knowing that her work mattered, not just for herself, but for others who faced similar struggles. Together, they traveled across cities and countries, meeting people from all walks of life, listening to their stories, and finding ways to amplify their voices. The foundation quickly gained traction, becoming a beacon of hope for marginalized professionals seeking support and representation. One of its flagship programs was the Rising Leaders Mentorship Initiative, which paired young talents from underrepresented communities with seasoned executives willing to guide them. For many participants, this mentorship wasn't just about career advancement. It was about seeing someone who looked like them succeed in spaces where they'd often felt unwelcome. Seeing Maya speak at our kickoff event changed everything for me, said one participant, a young black woman named Jasmine. She reminded me that I belong here, and that I have the right to demand respect. Another groundbreaking effort was the Foundation's collaboration with schools and universities to create pipelines for diverse talent. By partnering with institutions serving minority students, they helped bridge the gap between education and employment, ensuring that opportunities weren't limited by systemic barriers. Scholarships funded by the Foundation allowed students to pursue degrees without the crushing weight of debt, while internship programs provided hands-on experience in industries historically difficult to break into. But perhaps the most impactful aspect of their work was the advocacy campaigns they launched. Through powerful storytelling and data-driven research, the Thompsons highlighted the realities of bias in professional settings. Their viral campaign, "When Equality Starts Here," encouraged companies to audit their hiring practices, pay structures, and promotion policies. Thousands of businesses pledged to take part, committing to transparency and accountability. Some even credited the campaign with helping them identify blind spots they hadn't noticed before. Despite their success, Maya and Marcus remained grounded. They knew that real change took time and that setbacks were inevitable. Not everyone welcomed their efforts with open arms. Critics accused them of being overly ambitious or unrealistic, claiming that dismantling deeply ingrained systems of inequality was impossible. Others dismissed their initiatives as performative, suggesting that their wealth made them disconnected from the everyday struggles of ordinary people. But Maya and Marcus refused to let negativity deter them. Instead, they leaned into the criticism, using it as fuel to push harder and dig deeper. One particularly memorable moment came during a panel discussion at a global leadership summit. Maya sat alongside activists, academics, and industry leaders, sharing insights about the challenges of creating equitable workplaces. When an audience member asked how she managed to stay hopeful despite facing so much resistance, Maya smiled, thoughtfully before responding. "Hope isn't something you wait for," she said. "It's something you build. Every small victory, every person we help, every policy we change, it adds up. And when you see those ripples spreading outward, touching lives you'll never even meet, that's when you realize the fight is worth it." Her words resonated deeply with the crowd, earning a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Later, Marcus joked that he'd never seen so many grown adults cry in one room. But beneath his humor lay immense pride. Watching Maya transform from someone who once doubted her voice to someone whose voice inspired millions was nothing short of extraordinary. As the years went by, the Thompsons' influence continued to grow. Their foundation expanded globally, reaching communities in Africa, Asia, Europe, and beyond. They worked tirelessly to ensure that their message transcended borders, cultures, and languages, emphasizing that the fight for equality was universal. Along the way, they formed alliances with other changemakers, entrepreneurs, politicians, artists, all united by a shared vision of a fairer, more inclusive world. At home, their bond only strengthened. Marcus often teased Maya about how she'd turned him into a philanthropy junkie, but deep down he knew she'd awakened a side of him he hadn't fully embraced before. Together, they balanced their roles as partners, parents, they adopted 2 children during this period, and advocates, proving that love and purpose could coexist harmoniously. Looking back, Maya sometimes found it hard to believe how far they'd come. That fateful day when Ryan splashed soda on her felt like a lifetime ago, a distant memory overshadowed by the triumphs that followed. Yet, she never forgot the lessons it taught her. That vulnerability could lead to strength, that pain could inspire action, and that justice required courage. One evening, as they sat together on the same balcony where their journey had truly begun, Marcus turned to Maya and asked, "Do you think we've done enough?" Maya paused, gazing out at the city skyline shimmering with lights. Then with a quiet smile, she replied, "We'll never be done. There will always be more work to do, more people to help, more barriers to break. But what we've built, it's a start. And sometimes, a start is all you need. Her words hung in the air, simple, yet profound. Marcus nodded, taking her hand in his. Together they sat in silence, watching the stars emerge one by one, each twinkling like a promise of hope, for themselves, for their children, and for the countless lives they'd touched along the way. And though the road ahead remained long and uncertain, one thing was clear. Maya and Marcus Thompson had proven that when love, determination, and justice came together, anything was possible.